The United States Senate, a chamber steeped in tradition and gravitas, is no stranger to heated debates and ideological clashes. On a seemingly ordinary workday in June 2025, the Senate hearing room became the stage for an extraordinary confrontation that would reverberate far beyond its walls. The topic was climate policy, specifically the Green New Deal, a bold legislative proposal championed by progressive firebrand Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. But what began as a policy discussion quickly escalated into a personal and ideological battle when AOC launched a stinging attack on Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, mocking his folksy Southern demeanor and calling him a joke. What followed was a masterclass in composure, wit, and political strategy from Kennedy, whose response not only turned the tables, but left an indelible mark on American political discourse. This moment, captured live on camera and amplified across social media, became a cultural phenomenon, reflecting the deep divisions and aspirations of a nation at a crossroads. This is the story of that day, a clash of generations, ideologies, and styles that will be remembered for years to come. The Senate hearing room was abuzz with anticipation as senators, aides, and reporters filed in. The agenda was clear: a debate on the Green New Deal, a sweeping proposal aimed at combating climate change while addressing economic inequality. The room, with its high ceilings and polished wood, exuded an air of solemnity, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. Climate change, a polarizing issue, had drawn sharp lines between progressives pushing for bold action and conservatives advocating caution and fiscal responsibility. At the center of the storm was AOC, the young, charismatic representative from New York, known for her fiery rhetoric and unapologetic advocacy for systemic change. Her presence in the Senate hearing, though not as a senator, was a testament to her influence within the Democratic Party and her role as a leading voice on climate issues. Across the room sat Senator John Kennedy, a seasoned politician from Louisiana, whose Southern drawl and folksy aphorisms belied a razor-sharp intellect and a knack for connecting with everyday Americans. As the hearing began, the atmosphere was thick with expectation. Reporters, stationed at the back, typed furiously on their laptops, sensing the potential for a headline-grabbing moment. Aides whispered to one another, and senators exchanged glances, aware that the stakes were high, not just for policy, but for the public's perception of their leadership. AOC approached the podium with purpose, her dark hair pulled back tightly, her eyes scanning the room with intensity. She began with a broad appeal, addressing her colleagues with a tone that was both commanding and urgent. "Dear colleagues," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, "we are discussing the fate of this planet. Devastating storms, communities swept away, and the cost in lives that people are paying." Her words were met with nods from her progressive allies, but her gaze soon locked onto Senator Kennedy, who sat calmly, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. AOC's tone shifted, her voice taking on a sharper edge. Yet it's hard to maintain seriousness when a senator in this room keeps turning the discussion into a comedy act with folksy phrases as if he's standing at a Southern fair. The room fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of her words. AOC paused, her lips curling into a cold smirk, and then pointed directly at Kennedy. "Senator Kennedy," she said, enunciating each syllable with precision, In this critical discussion, you are a joke, and not the kind that makes people laugh. A ripple of gasps and murmurs spread through the room. A few younger senators aligned with AOC let out chuckles, but most of the audience exchanged uneasy glances. Neutral senators furrowed their brows, clearly disapproving of the personal attack. Reporters in the back rows, sensing a sensational story, began typing faster, their fingers racing to capture the moment. The cameras, unblinking, zoomed in on Kennedy's face, waiting for his reaction. But Kennedy remained still, his bright eyes meeting AOC's without a trace of agitation. His lips stayed closed, neither smiling nor frowning, his silence a stark contrast to AOC's fiery rhetoric. The absence of an immediate response seemed to embolden her further. She pressed on, her tone now dripping with sarcasm. You talk about economic costs, Senator Kennedy, but do you know the real price of inaction? Communities like mine in the Bronx, where people face flooding and pollution, don't need your farmer-style quips. They need action, vision, someone who actually understands the issue. Scattered applause rose from AOC's allies, but the enthusiasm was tempered. A neutral senator near the back shook their head subtly, whispering to a colleague, while an AOC aide in the corner smiled with pride but betrayed a flicker of unease, as if sensing that AOC had crossed a line. The cameras remained fixed on Kennedy, capturing every detail, the glint of light on his glasses, the steady rhythm of his fingers tapping lightly on the table, and the quiet confidence in his gaze. Feeling the room's attention, AOC pressed her attack. She took a step closer to the podium, her eyes locked on Kennedy. You may think you're clever with your folksy sayings, but on this issue, you're nothing more than a bystander, failing to grasp the urgency of our time, she declared, her gestures emphatic, as if trying to etch her words into the minds of everyone present. We need leaders who dare to think big, who dare to act, not people who just sit there cracking cheap jokes. The room stirred again, with AOC's supporters offering louder applause, though it was not as strong as she might have hoped. Reporters exchanged nods, sensing that this moment would define the hearing. A journalist from a major newspaper whispered to a colleague, "She just poked a hornet's nest." Kennedy isn't someone who goes down easily. AOC, undeterred, continued her onslaught. I represent the young people, those living with the consequences of delay, she said, her voice rising with passion. We don't have time for jokes, Senator Kennedy. We need action now. She concluded her remarks and sat down, her eyes still fixed on Kennedy, daring him to respond. The room waited, the tension palpable, as all eyes turned to the senator from Louisiana. Kennedy cleared his throat, a small sound that nonetheless commanded the room's attention. When he spoke, his warm southern drawl filled the space, unhurried and deliberate, each word chosen with care. Miss Ocasio-Cortez, he began, his gaze locking onto hers unwavering. I grew up in a small town where folks don't shout to prove they're right. I studied at the best schools not to boast, but to learn that words need weight, not just volume. The room seemed to shrink under the force of his calm. A few conservative senators smiled discreetly, while neutral ones leaned forward, drawn in by Kennedy's ability to turn a personal attack into a statement of principle. He continued, his voice steady but sharp, like a blade hidden in velvet. You talk about action, about saving the planet. I agree, we need action. But action isn't expensive promises that regular folks end up paying for. I represent working people who don't have time for flashy dreams, but need solutions they can trust. Whispers rippled through the room. A reporter in the far corner scribbled quickly, sensing that Kennedy was turning the tide. AOC, unwilling to cede ground, stood up immediately, her hands on her hips, her voice tinged with urgency. Senator Kennedy, you talk about working people, but do you really understand what they're going through? When their homes are swept away by storms, when the air they breathe is full of smoke, they don't need clever words. They need bold policies like the Green New Deal. Kennedy didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze calm but piercing, and responded with a faint smile, not mocking, but confident. Miss Ocasio-Cortez, I understand my people. They're the ones working from dawn to dusk, who don't want to hear plans that sound nice but leave them in debt. If you want to talk policy, let's talk about how we pay for it, instead of criticizing how I speak. His words, though gentle, cut deeply, earning nods from neutral senators and anxious glances from AOC's supporters. The room's atmosphere grew electric, the clash between the two senators now the focal point of the hearing. AOC, sensing Kennedy was stealing the spotlight, pushed harder. You can talk about costs, but you're dodging the real issue, she fired back, her voice rising. We can't wait any longer. Young people, communities like mine, are suffering right now. Do you think your folksy sayings can calm the storms out there? Kennedy merely shrugged, a gesture both casual and calculated. For the first time in the hearing, he stood, and the room fell silent. You talk about storms, Miss Ocasio-Cortez, he said, his voice lower, almost storytelling in its cadence. I've seen storms in Louisiana where homes are swept away, where people lose everything. I'm not here to put on a show, but to ensure the solutions we offer don't bury those folks in more debt. If you want to call that folksy, go ahead. My people call it the truth. His words landed like a quiet thunderclap. A few conservative senators clapped lightly, while AOC's group grew quieter. A reporter whispered, he just turned her attack to his advantage. The cameras captured Kennedy sitting down, his gaze still locked on AOC, daring her to continue. AOC, caught off guard but unyielding, stood again. Senator, your truth is just a way to delay, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. The Green New Deal isn't a dream. It's a plan to save our future. If you can't keep up, maybe you should step aside for those who dare to act. Kennedy, with an almost supernatural calm, gave a slight smile, his eyes glinting with mischief. The room sensed he hadn't played his final card. Reporters typed faster, anticipating that this clash would dominate headlines. The tension reached its peak as AOC sat down, her eyes still burning with defiance. She believed she had cornered Kennedy, but the room's situated veteran senator was not done. The cameras captured every detail: Kennedy's steady gaze, AOC's fleeting unease. Reporters sensed a turning point. Kennedy stood again, adjusting his tie with deliberate calm. His southern drawl filled the room, not loud but resonant. Miss Ocasio-Cortez, he began, his eyes fixed on her. I'm not here to compete over who speaks louder or who has prettier dreams. I'm here to talk about what matters to the American people. Not flashy promises, but solutions they can rely on. The room fell silent, every eye drawn to him. A neutral senator leaned forward, intrigued. Kennedy continued, his voice now sharp with sincerity. You talk about storms, floods, suffering communities. I've walked through waterlogged roads in Louisiana, talked to people who lost homes, livelihoods. They don't need costly promises. They need plans that work without costing everything. His words sent ripples through the room. Even some of AOC's allies couldn't deny their weight. AOC gripped her hands tightly, her confidence wavering. Kennedy raised a hand, gently but firmly, and continued. You call me backward, but backward isn't talking about what people need instead of what they want to hear. I'm here to ensure every tax dollar is used wisely, that policies don't push folks into hardship. If that's folksy, I'll take it, because it's the truth. The room erupted in applause, not just from conservatives but from neutrals swayed by his sincerity. AOC's earlier fire seemed to dim. She stood, her voice striving for calm. Senator Kennedy, you talk about truth, but you're obstructing progress. The Green New Deal is the only path to save this planet. The price of delay is the lives of millions. Kennedy, still seated, tilted his head. Miss Ocasio-Cortez, I'm not obstructing progress. I want progress that doesn't leave working people behind. If you call that delay, I call it responsibility. The applause that followed was louder, with neutral senators joining in. AOC sat, her eyes scanning her allies for support, but the room now belonged to Kennedy. Minutes after the hearing, a 3-minute clip of Kennedy's response went viral on Twitter, posted by a freelance reporter with the headline, Kennedy silences AOC in climate debate. Within an hour, it amassed millions of views, sparking hashtags and memes. On TikTok, reenactments trended, with users mimicking Kennedy's drawl and AOC's defiance. Instagram posts quoted Kennedy's lines over artistic backgrounds, while AOC's supporters pushed back, defending her climate advocacy. Major news outlets jumped in. CNN analyzed the clash of generations, noting AOC's passion but Kennedy's strategic win. Fox News hailed Kennedy as a defender of traditional values, while Politico and The Hill took neutral stances, highlighting the generational and regional divides. Social media became a battleground, with AOC supporters urging focus on climate issues, while Kennedy's fans celebrated his composure. The cultural impact extended beyond politics. Online forums buzzed with discussions about Kennedy's defense of those underestimated for their accent or background. Environmental groups backed AOC but urged strategic adjustments. Media outlets were criticized for hyping drama over substance, yet continued to dissect the clash. The confrontation between Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and Senator John Kennedy in the Senate hearing on climate reform was far more than a policy debate. It was a vivid reflection of the deep divisions coursing through American society. It encapsulated the clash of generations, ideologies, and communication styles that define much of the nation's political landscape in 2025. AOC's fiery passion, rooted in her commitment to urgent climate action and social justice, resonated powerfully with younger audiences and progressives who see her as a beacon of change. However, her decision to launch personal attacks, mocking Kennedy's Southern drawl and labeling him a joke, cost her sympathy among neutral observers and senators who valued decorum over theatrics. Her approach, while bold, revealed a strategic misstep. In a setting where policy arguments are expected to take center stage, personal jabs can alienate potential allies and shift focus from the issue at hand. Senator Kennedy, by contrast, demonstrated a masterclass in composure and strategic restraint. His calm, incisive response transformed AOC's attacks into an opportunity to reaffirm his values: responsibility, pragmatism, and a deep connection to the working people of Louisiana. By refusing to retaliate with insults, Kennedy turned the tables, earning respect not only from his conservative base, but also from neutral senators who appreciated his ability to rise above the fray. His measured words, delivered with a warm Southern cadence, carried a weight that resonated beyond the Senate chamber, reminding viewers that strength in politics often lies in sincerity and connection rather than volume. The viral spread of this moment, particularly Kennedy's poised retort, underscored the power of media in amplifying political theater. Within hours, a 3-minute clip of the exchange dominated social media platforms, from Twitter to TikTok, sparking memes, reenactments, and heated debates that reflected the polarized state of American discourse. This confrontation highlighted several profound lessons for both the participants and the public. For AOC, the episode was a reminder that passion, while a powerful motivator, must be tempered with strategic discipline. Her ability to galvanize young people and advocate for bold policies like the Green New Deal is undeniable, but her personal attacks risked overshadowing her message. To broaden her appeal and build coalitions, AOC must learn to balance her fiery rhetoric with a willingness to engage constructively with those who hold differing views. The Senate, after all, is a place where alliances are forged through dialogue, not confrontation. Her challenge moving forward is to channel her energy into persuading skeptics rather than alienating them, ensuring that her vision for a sustainable future gains traction among moderates and pragmatists. For Kennedy, the clash reinforced his image as a steady, principled leader, but it also posed a challenge. His emphasis on fiscal responsibility and practical solutions resonated with many, particularly in rural and conservative communities. However, he must guard against being perceived as an obstructionist, someone who prioritizes caution over progress. In an era where climate change demands urgent action, Kennedy's pragmatic approach risks being seen as dismissive of the younger generation's fears about their future. To maintain his relevance, he must articulate a vision that acknowledges the need for environmental action while staying true to his commitment to working people. His ability to connect with everyday Americans through his folksy style is a strength, but it must be paired with concrete proposals that address the climate crisis without alienating his base. The broader lesson for the American public is perhaps the most enduring. In a polarized nation, respect and listening are essential for progress. The AOC Kennedy showdown was a microcosm of the cultural and ideological divides that define the United States: urban versus rural, young versus old, progressive idealism versus conservative pragmatism. Yet it also revealed the potential for dialogue to bridge these gaps. Kennedy's refusal to match AOC's personal attacks with vitriol of his own demonstrated that dignity and reason can prevail, even in the heat of conflict. AOC's passion, while occasionally misdirected, underscored the urgency of addressing climate change and the need for leaders to inspire action. Together, their clash showed that both sides have something valuable to contribute, but only through mutual respect can they find common ground. The role of media in this event cannot be overstated. The viral clip of Kennedy's response, which garnered millions of views within hours, illustrated how modern media amplifies political moments, often prioritizing drama over substance. Social media platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram turned the confrontation into a cultural phenomenon, with users on both sides crafting narratives to suit their biases. AOC's supporters rallied around her climate advocacy, while Kennedy's fans celebrated his composure as a triumph of traditional values. Yet this frenzy also highlighted a troubling trend: the tendency of media to focus on spectacle rather than policy. While the climate debate was the ostensible subject of the hearing, much of the public discussion centered on the personal dynamics between AOC and Kennedy, overshadowing the urgent question of how to address environmental challenges. This moment also sparked broader conversations about identity and representation in politics. Kennedy's defense of his Southern roots resonated with those who feel marginalized for their accents or backgrounds, as seen in Reddit threads and online forums where users shared stories of being underestimated for similar reasons. AOC's advocacy for urban communities and young people spoke to those who feel their voices are often ignored in favor of entrenched interests.